Welcome to the Fraiday Labs podcast. Let's get started.
All right. I'm here with Chad Jardine and Ben Ard. This is impromptu. We're going to be talking about knowledge, governance, content, context, and I was explaining how we've been having some discussions on Slack as well as in some in-person exchanges about all of this. Ben, you come with some unique perspectives, especially with your experience with Masset. And I've really enjoyed your perspective and insights on this matter. Right now, I am architecting the infrastructure for a knowledge base to be distributed at scale across a large team in such a way that our AI is very smart, that contextually has both long-term and short-term context engineering. So that's a little bit of why I asked you guys to jump in. And I think where this starts a little bit, we've had a little bit of discussion on this on LinkedIn today. I've enjoyed seeing some people's comments on one of my posts, but specifically about defining knowledge and defining knowledge base. And so if it's cool, I'm going to share my current view and thoughts about these definitions, and then I'd love for you guys to jump in. The first is knowledge, and this is simple. This is just something that's understood. This could be facts, relationships, know-how, and it may be published or not published. When we talk about publishing, which we'll talk about content in a minute and what happens when we document knowledge, but to me, that's like the core definition of knowledge is just something that's understood. And to be honest, it may not even be right. We don't always, our understanding is not always perfect. It's not always spot on. In fact, a lot of this discussion is just trying to help clear up some understanding to better understand or better solidify knowledge. Now, a knowledge base, this to me is when an understanding of something becomes authoritative, becomes canonical, something blessed by an organization or group that says, yes, we put our kind of stock behind this understanding. We accept this as a source of truth. And then it may still not be documented, but that accepted truth, once documented and stored, to me, that is when it becomes knowledge base. So that's a quick definition between knowledge and knowledge base. I'd love to hear Chad, Ben, what are you thinking on this?
I really like it. I think it's a good definition. It was interesting. I had a conversation with Claude today, and I was going and kind of waxing philosophical based off of your questions and all that stuff. And one interesting little nuance there that Claude put onto it was that knowledge can be facts, but there's typically a perspective or point of view. I think that's interesting, like a knowledge base for a company or an individual. It's not just like this static set of facts. It's here's our take on these facts or these concepts or this data, and that has led us to a specific perspective. And that is the perspective and the point of view that we take, that we care about. And I think that's really vital for informing AI so that it can start to understand my point of view rather than just looking at pure facts and coming up with its own conclusions. It's here are the conclusions we've come to. So that's something that I thought was also really interesting about knowledge.
I'm going to share in a second after Chad shares his opinion on the point of view piece, because I love that. I'm glad you brought it up, and I think it's super important. Chad, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, so when I think about what knowledge base meant in our vernacular before the advent of AI, like the knowledge base was like as opposed to a database. It was a repository of kind of questions and answers. This is what companies used as their self-service support. Yeah, go ask our knowledge base. Go query our knowledge base. And I think that creates a little bit of a foundational understanding of it's like, okay, this is information that is relevant to the company and it's accessible by users. So internal or external to the company, people can draw on this and feel like it's authoritative.
I think that It is having these discussions with you guys and with others that really helps me gain clarity and improve my understanding. Ben, I love what you're saying about the perspective and point of view. And I think it's so critical because that's what makes our AI unique to us and makes it different than just some canned out of the box responses. But the reason why this is also important is because we need to be able to feed this knowledge base, not just knowledge, but our knowledge base. We need to be able to give that to AI in a way that it understands us and has the context. This is part of the context engineering. And previously, even so much as a week ago, the way that I was engineering our context, I was confusing more temporary information, data that's much more ephemeral context. I was placing it or storing it in a knowledge base, which to me, now as I think more about it and look back at that, I'm breaking the rules of knowledge base because knowledge base is meant to be that source of truth and it's supposed to be long lasting and durable. But this more ephemeral context that I was putting in there, I was putting in things like meetings, right? Markdown versions of my meetings and Slack updates or summaries of my Slack messages for that day that accumulate over time. It's really important that AI has the understanding of what's happening now. It's got that knowledge of the now, but you can't confuse the knowledge base with ephemeral knowledge, right? You have to be able to not only differentiate, but also be able to orchestrate your AI to point to the right storage or places for that information and that it understands the rules, right? That it has the instructions on how to use that. But I think it's really
I'm
important
just
we
saying to
don't.
treat the information. If I understand right, you're saying, sorry to interrupt, Pete, but if I understand what you're saying, is that you need enough structure, or maybe it's just instruction or guardrails, so that your AI is treating these different types of information appropriately.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. It's that it's got that instruction to treat it different, right? Like it's very different type of knowledge and it needs to understand how and like where it is, how to use it, when to use it, and where to go find it. Ben, what are your thoughts?
I love the concept though of having, I like how you're using the terminology canon. I like the idea of the knowledge base to say, here are facts, here are truths, here are things that are not necessarily ever going to change. Here's the persona, here's the product, here's the, price points, here's all of this information that you need to rely on. And it's not going to be changed that often unless there is a major company pivot, shift, things like that. And I like having this secondary knowledge source because what you're talking about is the real time elements that are trying to help you accomplish specific tasks. That's why we want meetings and Slack messages. It's so that I can say, hey, AI, help me streamline the response or my email to this person or whatever it may be. And to be completely honest, that's useful for a shorter period of time until I've accomplished the task, moved on to the next item. And a lot of that stuff honestly can be deleted. It's almost like this temporary database of 60 days or something like that. It's not necessarily deleted, but deep archives. So if you ever really need to go find it, you can do it, but it's not necessarily knowledge. But it is a really interesting point because AI doesn't know how to weight things if you don't give it two different contexts. And to say, this is the knowledge base, this is always true. Whereas this temporary stuff is in the moment, just specific for this. It never overrides the other components here. And I think it's interesting. And it goes to this concept of looping. It's the looping, but then there's this whole graph, and it's where certain loops can override other loops and stuff like that. And I think that it's giving it the proper context to understand what trumps other rules and concepts so it understands that hierarchy. Because internally, we get that. We understand some truths we may not believe all the way, but we're going to assume they're okay for now. And AI doesn't have that perception unless we give it to it.
I came across an interesting example of this. I was listening to the SaaStr podcast with Jason Lemkin, and they were talking about, he's pushed hard on building out kind of AI agents that are responsible for different areas of the business. And the example that they gave was their marketing AI didn't understand that their big annual event, their SaaStr event, had passed. So it was super important for a period of time, but now they're 4 weeks past the event and the AI doesn't realize it's no longer that important. So I think that what's interesting about that, you think if it's ephemeral, well, do we ever need to know it? But yeah, at the right time, that was really important information and drove a lot of decisions. But then once that time had passed, it's like, okay, now essentially the sell-by date of that information had passed and now it was no longer the same quality.
I think a lot of companies, I'm certain, I see this all the time. Everyone struggles with this. And it's because it's hard. The problem with this that all these companies are having, and why this is just one part, there are many, but one reason why companies struggle to find as much return on their AI spend is that they use AI out of the box. And when they're using AI out of the box as it stands, like it's got a smart brain, it's got some connectors, but it doesn't have that knowledge. It doesn't have the context about me, about my company, about my team. It doesn't have the temporary ephemeral stuff that's still important. And it doesn't have that long-term durable knowledge base. Especially doesn't have the orchestration on the rules and instructions on how and when to pull it all in. Here's a couple of examples. In the short term, I saw on YouTube, I spend probably way too much time learning on YouTube. I love it. I'm addicted to it. But at the same time, like, anyhow, so I saw this video and this AI creator was talking about how he would have this routine at the end of every day. It would go through, take a summary of his Slack, a summary of his meetings, pulling from transcripts, and then it would create a markdown format built for open knowledge format or OKF it worked. But holy cow, it just sucks tokens. Just an absolute token suck. And as I was like working on this, Chad and I were experimenting with it, and Chad messaged me and he's like, dude, this is a lot. This is taking a lot of tokens here. And so then I went into how can I make this better? And then I realized and please correct me if I'm wrong, or other positions you guys may have on this on good reasons why you should bring it in. One, convert it to markdown format, and then two, like why you might want to store it. But I'm just like, why not just bring this in via MCP or CLI? And in that case, and some argue that it should be through API. And to be honest, I see good reasons for all of them and based on your specific needs. But basically where I came to was, instead of trying to ingest all of this more ephemeral, temporary type of knowledge and context, to bring that in just through connectors. And then to orchestrate, especially in my agents MD or my Claude MD, to point through the instructions on, here's where you're going to find this information, here's how you're going to pull it in. So now it's much more connector based than it is trying to convert anything, and like there's no tokens like that. There's definitely token use, but it's not as much of a token suck. So that's when it comes to that short-term context, that's my current thinking. I'm not sure if you guys have found anything better or have perspective on that.
I agree with that 100%. So my philosophy is the new tech stack will be your large language model of choice at the core of everything you're doing. And every single data source is going to be a branch of that tech stack. So you have the knowledge base, right? It can go in, understands those items. It's all connected through MCP. Same thing for emails. It's going to connect over to your email. It has that capability in that data source. Obviously, I care about content, like having content as an MCP connector, but you're going to have those different pillars. One of my favorite tools is Granola. I use Granola all the time. It's not a weird bot on my screen when I'm in a meeting, but it can record those. And I have just trained my AI really well to say, look at Granola if there was a meeting and give you context. And now I don't have to worry about sucking in all that stuff and having Google record it and then put it on all that kind of stuff. Granola is the source of truth. And you just need to connect for that. And it's really just your Claude.md has this really good, like you said, index to know, okay, for this information, go here. It can do that. I also view, it's interesting you said that people aren't getting the most value out of AI that they could. And I agree with that 100%. Number one is the context. Number two is the connections for the AI to actually do things. And it's the interesting thing. I think it's also connecting to it can send emails or at least draft them for me. It can actually look at certain data to help me make certain decisions. I know people are really nervous about financial data. Yeah, you're going to have to do it in a secure way. But if you want AI to help you with budgeting and understanding everything, it's got to have access to the knowledge in order to do it. And it's so funny because for so long, businesses have always had this problem of knowledge distribution. There's always been that certain people are in the light, some people just have no idea what's going on. And honestly, the people that are informed are the ones that can perform to their best ability. It's funny because it's the same problems. It's just we've added this all powerful separate teammate into the mix. But I do agree with you. I think that the MCP connection is going to create this network of data and connections, and your large language model is going to sit at the core of all of it.
Absolutely agreed. Chad, you want to add any flavors to this? Where it takes us when we're talking about tech stack, and especially as we're looking at marketing, in the marketing world, we've had content creators, content managers, content governance. But where this is taking, where the world is going, is now going to be context creation, context management, context governance. And part of that is going to be knowledge base. And we're seeing already now, we're seeing CMS systems converting to KMS systems or knowledge management systems. And I think we're going to see a lot more roles shifting. I think it is natural for the marketing world because we've been doing this for so long when it comes to the content management and governance, for knowledge management to fall under marketing, or for marketers to then be moving into other orgs. And so I think where it lives in different organizations may shift. It could even live in under engineering, right? But I could easily see a marketer who is managing a CMS platform and has all of this down, right? Because what we need to discuss next is this idea of knowledge governance and how does something get into a knowledge base. But I think that the future for marketers to understand, one, there are new roles opening up for marketers, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be in marketing, because the knowledge base, wherever the knowledge base lives, there's opportunity for marketers there. So I think that's something, one point for marketers to be paying attention to. What do you guys think?
Yeah, honestly, the context is going to be viable, and it's going to be a pathway that people can genuinely take. It'll be interesting to see if it lives inside of marketing or strategy or IT, because at some point in time, the knowledge is going to be like the holy grail of a company, and you're going to keep that record really sacred, because if you update anything, if your AI is that integrated, it could literally change what everyone is doing. And hopefully it does in a meaningful and a good way. But I think you're going to have these gatekeepers, which I think a lot of IT reps are really familiar with this when it comes to single sign-on and access to tools and things like that. But you're going to have people that I think are going to be flipping switches saying, okay, Ben has access to this knowledge now, or Ben just got demoted, which is the most likely thing for me to happen in a company. But like now, C-suite, they have access to C-suite meetings. They have access to board meeting notes. They have access to board meeting decks and the overall financials. And now their AI is good. But I think you're going to have someone that has this like really protected position who's going to get a lot of donuts on their desk to be like, hey, I'd love the billing information lever turned on for me so I can do my job better. And they're going to have to justify it. You're going to have gatekeepers, and I think you're going to have more of them. And that may be marketers, it may be strategists, in my opinion.
Yeah. When I'm looking at knowledge governance right now, and as we're talking about marketers moving into this role, but in this larger view of knowledge-based management, we all of a sudden have to go outside of our department and look company-wide, where if you're going to actually do this at an org level, where this knowledge base you need to create standardizations of how it's managed. How does the content get in? And there are owners or people responsible for the types of knowledge. And I mean, personally, my current view of it is that every department should be responsible for their own knowledge documents. And then in those departments, you should delegate to different team members if there are, it depends on the size of your organization, but within each team, there should be knowledge managers for that specific team. Let's say like the product marketing team, they should have someone responsible for their knowledge-based documents. And then for like your growth marketers and so on, right? Across all your different departments, there should be somebody responsible. And then there should be someone above them who reviews it, because what really makes it knowledge base is that idea of ratification, to put a stamp of approval that says, yes, like this is now approved as company knowledge base. And it shouldn't, in my opinion, rarely should it be accepted as the source of truth without having at least some other eyes on it. To me, this feels similar to merging code to main, right? With like developers and their pull requests. This is like knowledge pull request, is that somebody should have eyes on it and should review it just to make sure that one, like it's in the proper format, it's following the rules. That's the governance piece. And this is where I'd love to open it up for you guys to check my thinking. I personally feel like knowledge base should be formatted in Markdown. And it's because it's easy to read for humans and it's easy to read for the AI. But I am certain that those who are, a lot of organizations and teams and people are just feeding like PDFs and slide decks and all sorts of formats to AI. And to me, I think it should be converted. And ideally, if we look at like Google's recent, Ben, you turned me on to this, to the open knowledge format or OKF with the YAML front matter at the beginning to help give more like guidance, context to the AI as it's trying to find the proper documents or proper information. That I think that's the format should be, is the OKF formatted Markdown.
Hey, Pete, I think that brings something up, right? If you're like, I think for smaller orgs, the idea of having like a knowledge czar in every department, I think will feel daunting. I think that will feel,
Yeah.
But as you fleshed out what the role of that person would be, more and more, it sounds like something that an agent could do in terms of like following the rules. Agents are good at following the rules. If it's in terms of making sure things line up in the right format, that's something that agents are good at. And maybe it's like we've talked about, right? Where do you need your humies? And maybe you only need them at the top in that type of an org, or maybe something where it's just like getting the right content. It's dependent on having the right setup happen before you really launch to production.
I think it scales. Chad, I think you're right. I think at on a like an SMB or even startup, there's no reason why I can't have a knowledge base. I think that I should create some standardization. And Chad, I know that we're coming up on time for you, so feel free to jump when you need to go.
You guys, this rocks.
Yeah, thanks for joining. But I believe on this point that if it's one person, your own individual, you're a solopreneur, team of 3, team of 50, like it can scale, and it may feel daunting, but you can have AI do a lot of this, right? You teach it the rules, like where is it going to be stored? This literally can just be folders and files. And that's when we look at like the Andre Karpathy's LLM wiki, your knowledge base can simply be folders, subfolders, files, or you can use a tool. Like we're currently using a tool called Guru, and I'm working with my team on how to best optimize. And then how do we automate? What are ways that we can create automations around this so that people don't feel like they need to go through this heavy process of trying to convert everything into Markdown and put it with the prop. In fact, just today, I created a skill in Claude called Markdown Me. And all it does is it takes existing knowledge documents and converts it into that proper format. And then you can create a routine that says, hey, anytime, once a day at this time, go in, check if there's anything new. If there's anything new, convert it to the markdown. And like you can automate that phase. But to me, like it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be like this big ordeal. You can get it done pretty much in a couple hours.
That's cool. One thing that I'm ignorant on, and you talked about the proper format, and I know that AI really loves Markdown. I have seen, at least it popped up for a little while. It seems to have gone away, but like this argument for HTML files
HTML.
instead.
Yeah.
I personally don't love to read Markdown files. I
Yeah.
use them all the time for my AI. Most things are put into Markdown. I personally like to consume HTML files because I like to be able to see the visualizations. I like to do that. And it's interesting because you can have visual data translated to an AI to have it also understand. So there might be a component there where maybe there's a duplicate of content and those two work together depending on your audience. But I do think that as human beings, we are very visual.
Yes.
And I think that if you're having your knowledge base consumed by individuals and not just agents, there's an argument for HTML so
Yeah.
that you can make it a visual format where people can skim and understand and interact with. And it's also something we've all been trained on for the last however many years since the internet's come out. That's my only argument. Otherwise, I would say if Markdown was easier to read, yeah, humans and AI. But I do see some value in maybe some HTML being a part of it.
100%. The only argument for Markdown in this perspective, and then a counter argument against it. One is it is so easy. Anybody can create that and read it and understand it, and without any need for AI, right? But not everybody knows how to write HTML,
Fair.
right? And so if they were to open up and look at just the actual source doc, they may struggle to know how to edit, how to adjust it. But then the counter argument is AI can do it, right? Just tell AI to fix it or to change it, whatever.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's some kind of a bias for me. I've done SEO and things like that in marketing for years. Like,
Yeah.
I fully understand you have your H levels and all sorts of things
Yep.
that you can do with it, and it makes it a little bit easier to read. And so I don't know. It'll be interesting. Maybe someone will come out with some kind of a visual based markdown kind of a system or something like that might be the ultimate file. But I do think at least for the next some odd years, this knowledge base does need to be consumed by both AI and humans at the same time. I think eventually it may shift where humans don't even look or care about it. I know I don't for the most part as I'm feeding it information, but it'll be interesting to see as it transitions towards AI only looking at the knowledge base as opposed to humans.
Agreed. I've got one more thing, one more quick topic, and that's on content. Knowledge that is published, you could call that content. What we were talking about the other day, Ben, is that content is knowledge that is published for a specific audience with a specific intent or purpose in a specific format. There may be other like characteristics or traits, but those are the three that like I think are most important in this situation as we talk about context and knowledge, because not all content do you want to have as knowledge base, right? You're not going like every email that you send out or every social post that you put out, every blog article, it may not go into your knowledge base. Most of it won't. Most of it is ephemeral. Most of it is more, has a brief shelf life, right? But some content definitely can make it into your knowledge base. And I think that my personal opinion is it's that same process of we as a group or as a team or even just me as an individual. It's when you make the decision that says, yes, this meets the criteria that we have set to be knowledge base, and we stamp it, we approve it, we accept it, and now it's canonized and it's going to live there. Sure, it may need updating over time, just most knowledge base. And I think it's good that, Ben, that we give an example of some of these things. An example of knowledge base would be like a brand guide. Your brand guide is going to be something that changes over time, but it's like it doesn't change often. And your tone of voice, personality, these are things that your AI needs if it's going to be able to write like you. Because here's a use case. I just tested this yesterday, last night. I was testing if the way I have the AI orchestrated right now, if it can go into the knowledge base and pull in product information about Stack Adapt, particularly one of our products called Ivy, and then if it could pull our narrative hierarchy, like the way that we tell stories, and then if it could pull in our tone and voice, our personality, the way that we write, pull those things in, and then to write a blog article about Ivy, it just happened to be that was more knowledge-based type stuff, but it went through, it grabbed that stuff, and it created a pretty good article. Now, it needs some polish. And so we've got a little bit of work to do. But the thing is, if I would just have given that to AI out of the box without those contextual, without the knowledge base and more contextual layer, it would have been bad. And so I think that it shows not just why so many people struggle with AI return, and by nature, by virtue of that, the AI slop, is because they're not focused on knowledge base and not focused on context engineering. I think it's a critical piece that we need to get better at.
I agree. And the whole point of content is something I care a ton about as a co-founder of a company where we care about being the business home for content and all of that, making it AI accessible. I do think that your audience piece is really key when it comes to content. So it's this knowledge is typically has an internal inside the business kind of an audience. I think the instant that there's a public audience potentially for content, there is an opportunity to say, okay, we need to render this set of knowledge into a format for this audience that can be reusable, trackable, all that kind of stuff. But you're right, as the knowledge changes, that should be intertwined with the content to say we're out of sync, we need to update, we need to replace and do those kinds of things. But it's interesting, the instant you create content is the instant that it could become outdated or inaccurate. And as you build it in, like those two things, I think a lot of times people say your knowledge base and your content home needs to be the same place. I think so. It could be, but I also think with this MCP connection side of things, you could say, now here's the content that we're allowed to share publicly, all that kind of stuff. And let's just make sure that those elements are in sync to make sure that there's no discrepancies. And if there are any issues, let's go back to the owners of that knowledge to have them approve, sign off, and redo that content as well. But yeah, I think you're right. I think this is the whole thing, even with using your own personal AI, to businesses trying to optimize for their AI, the context, the knowledge, everything that goes into just the AI understanding the whole reason you're doing something and your preferences, your point of view. That is the nut we're all trying to crack. And I have found, and as you have as well, the better I can give AI information, the higher quality results I get and the more effective and powerful AI becomes for me. And it's fascinating because two people sitting next to each other can use the exact same model inside the same tool set. But if one gives it context and one does not, they have very different experiences and results. And if you can deploy that like you're doing to an entire organization, that can make a world of a difference.
Yeah, I am on a mission right now, Ben, to package this. You could call it a harness in a box. You could call, and within that harness embedded is your knowledge base. But I have this mission to make it stupid simple, where you could ship it out to your small SMB, a couple people on your team, or an entire large scale organization, and instantly make their AI way more effective and smarter. And my personal opinion, I feel pretty strong about it, is that everyone who really cares about getting really good output with AI and reducing AI slop should be trying to figure this out. I think about this as that it doesn't need to be super complex. I do think it can be simple, I think it definitely takes work. And it's one of those things that when you do the heavy lifting up front, it's more about maintenance and governance later, but it's a heavy lift as you start. But then after the heavy lift is done, then it's much easier. Also, for anybody who may be listening to this, this doesn't have to be super expensive. Any solopreneur can do this and literally can be free. You have to have your LLM probably on some sort of paid plan, right? And it's just about, you can be scrappy is what I'm saying. And there's
Yeah, just
not a
take the
big,
transcript of this whole conversation, give it to Claude and say, hey, help me build what Pete was talking about in a free way. And it's going to start to give you tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff and help you build it out anyways. So that's the kind of cool thing is you get resources, you can dump them right into your LLM and start taking action on them.
and then once you get something that you're like, yes, I like this, let's canonize it, right? And this is the way we're going to document. This is the way that we do this specific thing. So this is the way that we manage our knowledge base, right? Little meta there. But anyhow, Ben, thanks for joining me, man. This has been fun. Super impromptu. I literally messaged you like 3 minutes before you jumped in. But
Thanks for having me.
helping me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for helping me clear my thoughts on this, but it's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.